Well, welcome, folks. They say Hail Mary is good if you're down the last down in a football game and you throw that long pass and hope somebody catches it. Well, it looks like Senator Cruz thinks that Hail Mary is going to do some good for him. I doubt it sincerely, but he has chosen a very intelligent, attractive lady, Carly Fiorina, as his running mate. But he hadn't got anything to run on yet, so what is she going to be the mate to? We don't know. Terry.
Well, meanwhile, Trump is laying out his vision for what he would do as president in the area of foreign policy. Dale Hurd has the story.
My friend and the next Vice President of the United States, Carly Fiorina.
It's an unusual move for a presidential candidate to pick a vice presidential running mate before winning his party's nomination. Even more unusual when his path to the nomination is blocked. But trailing Donald Trump, Ted Cruz went ahead and announced his choice.
I am prepared to stand by his side and give this everything I have.
Carly Fiorina tussled with Trump early in the primary season for comments he made about her face, and the GOP frontrunner dismissed this latest move.
A new relationship has started, Cruz and Carly. Cruz can't win. What's he doing picking vice presidents?
Trump had other things to talk about as well. He gave a major foreign policy speech in Washington and warned America's allies they'll need to start paying for their own defense. He also railed on the Bush and Obama administrations for not stopping the persecution of Christians in the Middle East.
We have done nothing to help the Christians, nothing. And we should always be ashamed for that lack of action.
Trump went from there to Indiana, where he got the endorsement of legendary Indiana Hoosiers basketball coach Bobby Knight ahead of Tuesday's primary.
If we win Indiana, it's over. I'm not playing games with Indiana.
After Indiana votes, Hillary Clinton is hoping it's all over for Bernie Sanders. Delegate math is not with Sanders, who rallied thousands of screaming fans at Indiana University hours after he announced the layoffs of hundreds of campaign staffers.
Next Tuesday, let us have the highest voter turnout in Indiana history.
Ted Cruz is 400 delegates behind Trump, and while he expects to win Indiana, if he doesn't, analysts say it's all over. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
You know, I was watching Krauthammer, who just dumped on on Trump's foreign policy speech. Barry McCaffrey, former four-star general, said it was a home run, hit it out of the park. I think other foreign policy experts have applauded it. I personally read the thing. I thought he did a very good job. I mean, you only say so much in a speech, and it takes 20, 25 minutes. I mean, you can't outline a book on foreign policy. But what he's saying, it touches the heart of a lot of Americans. He said, look, we've been kicked around. We've been abused. They've taken advantage of us. When you look at NATO, only two nations, or I think two, give 2% of their GDP toward military. The rest of them aren't carrying their load, and it's true. World War II ended a long time ago, 1945, and we've still got substantial troops in Germany. Germany is a big power. Why should we pay the bill for that? And that's what Trump is saying. Same thing in Korea. We've got a huge contingent in Korea. South Korea is a huge nation, has vibrant industry, very prosperous. Why should we pick up the tab for defending them against the North? And that doesn't mean we pull back from international commitments, but it does mean we've got to ask them to pay the bills. And that's what Trump is saying. We've been like Uncle Sucker. And so I think a lot of Americans are saying, yes, Donald, you're saying it right. And this, I think, will help propel him along the way. But it's only a little bit more to go. Indiana could be a real turning point. Cruz, if he loses Indiana, he's finished. And Trump may just go ahead and say, all right, I'm it. He's already declared himself the presumptive nominee. And there's still a lot of negotiating back and forth. But I do think that his vice president is sitting there in Ohio. I mean, John Kasich hasn't won anything for president, and I understand the rules are such that he now cannot qualify to be the nominee for president. but he certainly would make a fantastic vice president and bring a lot of weight to the ticket. But that's up to Donald Trump to decide. Well, in other news, it looks as if the Supreme Court is going to side with former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell and against the federal government. The justice wanted to know if federal prosecutors went too far in their charges against the sitting governor. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Thanks, Pat. The justices had tough questions for the government about McDonnell's conviction on corruption charges under federal law. The case could have implications for elected officials across the country. The justices wanted to know if government prosecutors could use a vague law to charge a politician with a crime, even if he or she wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. Jennifer Wishon was inside the courtroom during oral arguments and brings us the story.
It looked like a very good day in the nation's highest court for Bob McDonnell. The former Virginia governor is facing 2 years in prison after being convicted of political corruption. But justices seem poised to overturn his conviction.
Never during any time in my 38 years of public service have I ever done anything that would abuse the powers of my office.
At issue is a federal law that forbids public officials from accepting money in exchange for official acts. The question is, what qualifies as an official act? In court, justices grappled with where to draw the line between corruption, giving away favors in return for gifts, and ordinary public service. Justices on both sides of the ideological divide seemed troubled by the nearly unbridled power federal prosecutors have to go after elected officials who are working to help the constituents who hired them. Justice Stephen Breyer, generally considered a liberal, was the most outspoken, saying the law used to convict McDonnell puts at risk behavior that is common. The government charged McDonnell with giving out favors in return for gifts, but lawyers for the former governor say he never gave anything back after receiving gifts from a businessman. A number of unlikely groups filed friend of the court briefs on McDonnell's behalf, including dozens of former White House attorneys for both Republican and Democratic presidents, including President Obama. Chief Justice Roberts remarked, "I think it's extraordinary that those people agree on anything." It's been a 3-year nightmare for the McDonnell family. Throughout the process, the former governor has relied on his Catholic faith.
I want to give credit to my Lord Jesus for his sustaining me and my wife and my family during these last 39 months that have been very, very difficult.
He and his wife Maureen, who also faces prison time, have tried to maintain some level of normalcy while they await the rulings on their cases. Governor McDonnell even volunteers for Operation Blessing.
Got 2 grandchildren and 2 more on the way, and started a new business. And I've got the most amazing friends in the world, and felt more love and support in the last 2 years than any time in my life. So I'm a very blessed man.
Along with his Christian faith, McDonnell, an attorney himself, has always expressed faith in the law.
I've given my life to public service in 38 years and have loved every minute of it. And this has obviously been a personal challenge, but I know the justice system will get this right.
The court is expected to issue its ruling in June. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
Thanks, Jennifer. Pat, do you agree with Governor McDonnell that the justice system is going to get it right on this one?
Well, you'd hope so. In this case, I think it's going to be the case. The Supreme Court, if Scalia had been still on the court, it would have been a so-called slam dunk. I mean, it'd probably been 5-2 or 6-2, 7-2, whatever, in favor of McDonnell. But it looks like with Breyer and others on the court, because the friends of the court, the so-called amicus briefs that were filed, go across the broad spectrum of attorneys general, both Democrat, both Republican, guys like Lanny Davis, who was a White House counsel for Clinton, and professors from Harvard, all say, here's the situation, ladies and gentlemen. We have in Virginia very liberal laws. There is no crime whatsoever in an official receiving gifts. None whatsoever, as long as he declares the gifts. So if he got $1 million from somebody, he's a gift. Okay. Now, the question is, did the man buy something for that gift? And if, in turn, the governor or the official then sits down and says, okay, I now give you water rights over the Chesapeake Bay, in exchange for your gift, that is a so-called quid pro quo, and that is illegal. That is corruption. Now, came up with Bob McDonnell. A man says, well, why don't you ride in my Ferrari? Big deal. Why don't you stay at my hunting lodge in the mountains? Big deal. It happens all the time. Would you host a meeting in the governor's mansion for some supporters of my company? All the time public officials do that because their job is to promote business from their constituents and to bring business to the state and to offer favorable situations for those doing business as their constituents. That's what they do. It's when they start this quid pro quo. You get the quid, but you don't give the quo. Bob McDonnell gave that Johnny, whatever he's doing, Williams, nothing. N-O-T-H-I-N-G, nothing. And so the Hobbs Act, the judge who ruled on this ruled incorrectly. He gave a charge to the jury was highly slanted. And the Justice Department was trying to get somebody who was a potential senatorial candidate. Bob would have won a Senate seat, not to mention being mentioned as a potential vice presidential. And so this was politics. And the Supreme Court, God bless them, is coming out right. And Chief Justice Roberts is asking the Justice Department, all right, tell us who you can prosecute. What acts would they have to do? Well, they can do almost anything. I mean, they could send out newsletters in favor of a company, and that could be in violation of the Hobbs Act. Well, it's too vague. And under our law, you do not put somebody in jail on a law that is so vague they can't understand what they're doing. And that's what Justice Breyer was talking about. This is unconstitutionally vague. Whew. After all these years, what I keep reminding my dear friend Bob McDonnell about what happened to Joseph when it was all over and he came out of prison, he wound up running Egypt. So I don't know if that's in the cards for Bob, but he's going to be a stronger man, a dedicated Christian, and a great public servant. He's one of the best governors we've ever had in Virginia, and this thing is a disgrace. So thank God. And we're finding people from CNN and others who heard of the justices and realize where that case is going. And so keep praying for Bob. The decision, actually, they vote right after the oral argument, and then they decide who's going to write the decision, and the chief will decide which member of the Supreme Court will write the decision, and we'll have a decision sometime, I think,
the
in June.
support he's had from his own peers is
What?
The support he's had from his own peers is remarkable.
He had business leaders, he had educational leaders, he had all kinds of distinguished lawyers on both sides of the guys like Lanny Davis and others said, look, this is a misapplication of law. If this Hobbs Act is supposed to be interpreted this way, then it is unconstitutional. And that's what the justices are saying. So anyhow,
can I say also, that's the kind of political junk that people are sick of.
They are.
You know,
they really are. They don't want crooked politicians, but here's an honest man who's being pilloried because he was a potential candidate. He would have won the Senate race if he'd run. No question he would have won it. And there's no question he would have been a vice president for Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. So they went out to get him. And this is a dirty game, but the man is... He's gone to his knees. He's cried out to God. He's exalted the Lord Jesus Christ, and God's going to honor him. So anyhow, whew, wow, what a story. Well, John, what's next?
Pat, after the recent earthquakes along the Ring of Fire in Ecuador and Japan, some people have raised questions about possible natural disasters right here in the U.S. The biggest one could come from Yellowstone National Park because it sits on top of the world's largest volcano. Back in 2011, Paul Strand visited Yellowstone and filed this report about just how devastating an eruption there would be.
Recent news stories warn Yellowstone is on the move. Since 2004, the ground has been expanding upwards at an accelerated pace, sometimes as much as 3 inches a year.
We have significant ground movement over tens of square miles.
That accelerated expanding has some folks worrying because Yellowstone is basically a slowly ticking time bomb. One that might take hundreds of thousands of years to blow, but blow it will. Because Yellowstone is the world's largest megavolcano, 53 miles across, and it's produced 3 of the planet's most monstrous eruptions. Hollywood in the doomsday flick 2012 imagined what it will look like if or when it happens again. with the main character racing, running, and flying away from the super hot pyroclastic clouds that would burn anyone to the bones caught in their blast. He couldn't really have raced, run, or flew fast enough to get away. All of Yellowstone's natural beauty, any wildlife that hadn't fled, any humans unfortunate enough to be within dozens of miles would be annihilated. Ash clouds would spread across much of the U.S. A Geological Society of London report states so much sulfuric acid would be created in the atmosphere, it would block sunlight and plunge Earth temperatures anywhere from 9 to 15 degrees for years. As the report puts it, such events could result in the ruin of world agriculture, severe disruption of food supplies, and mass starvation. The effects could be sufficiently severe to threaten the fabric of civilization. And that's what could lead to possibly 1 billion casualties. Half of the world's geysers are right here in Yellowstone, the result of water superheated by a huge magma chamber 4 to 6 miles below the surface, America's hottest hot spot. It's what would cause the next mega explosion. And that threat is what keeps scientists locking GPS monitors on the park surface 24 hours a day, and why they know the center of Yellowstone is rising about 2 inches every year.
If we were getting about a yard per year, we'd get real excited.
Because dramatic ground swelling can signal magma's on the way up, ready to cause a rerun of history's most destructive mega eruption.
Here's some of Yellowstone's lava up close. But looking into the distance, imagine the awesome and horrifying sight as that massive caldera that stretches out for dozens of miles erupted in the largest explosion in all of Earth's history.
It left a crater, also known as a caldera, so many miles across you could drop Tokyo right in the middle and have room left over. Yellowstone geologist Hank Hessler says that mega explosion blasted 600 cubic miles of molten rock out of this ground and shot up enough ash to bury all New York City under a mile of the sandy stuff.
That's 6,000 times larger than Mount St. Helens.
But will it happen here in Yellowstone again? Hessler says since the mega eruptions, the caldera has been filled in by some 80 smaller eruptions that spewed up lava. It's inevitable more will come.
We know those are in Yellowstone's future, but the big supervolcanoes, we do not know.
Still, most scientists say don't worry about visiting Yellowstone because signs of a coming catastrophic eruption would be clear weeks, maybe even decades or centuries before the big blow. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Yellowstone National Park.
Thanks, Paul. Beautiful scenery, but Pat, some pretty frightening scenarios in Paul's report.
Well, I used to work in Yellowstone. I had one summer working there, the Forest Service, and oh my, you know, I worked on a filling station actually pumping gas. We pumped about 8,000 gallons a day. We really were busy. It was a line from early morning till night, just, you know, coming through. But when we had a break, we'd go off and we'd swim in those geysers. The Yellowstone Lake is freezing cold, but these little geysers were coming up, so we'd have like a warm water swimming pool, and it was great, but I had no idea how bad it is. Here's the deal. They say if it erupted, it's been about 630,000 years since the last one, so it's a long time ago. But if it blew, we'd have about 2,300 cubic miles of stuff thrown into the atmosphere. And as our report showed, it would take the temperature down about 8 or 9 degrees, destroy agriculture, and it would go all around the world in a cloud of ash. I mean, we're sitting in America on the most dangerous earthquake potential, volcanic potential in the world. And with the Ring of Fire heating up, you read about, well, okay, Japan, it had a blow, and you had something in Indonesia, and you got something in Ecuador, a bad one, and then you may have some in Seattle. But remember, Yellowstone is sitting there in that overall zone of instability as the plates crunching it. We don't want to scare you, but it's fun to know that you better get right with the Lord, and if the thing blows up, hallelujah, we go up to be with Jesus. That's the answer. All right, Terry.
Well, thankfully, they're able to monitor it to some degree.
Well, a lot of good that's going to do. Yeah. You know, that ad that they have in the background is, what do you do? Are you a guard? Well, I'm a monitor, whether or not a robbery's taking place. And he looked and said, a robbery's taking place in this area. So that's all you can do is say, well, there's going to be an explosion. You can't stop it. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Newsflash, huh?